The video game industry is having an interesting year. On one hand, the major studios, particularly EA, are facing major backlash over how they use loot boxes. Not only are microtransactions a way to force players to pay in advance, many government regulators now think that loot boxes are unlicensed gambling. But on the upside, it's been a fantastic year for indie games, with titles like Cuphead, Hollow Knight, and What Remains of Edith Finch, among many others. Cuphead was made by two Canadian brothers with a lot of the beautiful animation drawn by hand. It came out at the end of September and it's already sold over 1 million copies. Just to give you some context, one of the biggest selling games overall this year is PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, which has sold about 20 million copies. Today, we're going to look at how the game marketplace Steam has had an impact on the sale of indie games. We'll look at what used to happen before it and whether this indie renaissance is a growing genre or just a bug. In the early days of computing, games had a very small market. The number of PC users was low, and any computers would require extra hardware to handle gaming. But a community of bedroom game makers did appear. The games spread as shareware. Free demos and early versions would be given out for magazines, and then players could contact the designer to buy the full version. The numbers were small, so this model worked. In the 90s, there was a huge boom in consoles, but an indie scene was impossible since they would have needed to manufacture their own cartridges if they wanted to make a Mario Kart mod. As for PCs, the rise of 3D gaming meant that a bedroom developer couldn't keep up with the cost and time involved. So big commercial studios basically killed off the indie scene entirely. They were saved in the end by the spread of the internet. Now, games could easily be distributed without the cost of creating physical copies. Developers also had better tools to work with, like Adobe Flash and GameMaker, designed by Mark Overmars, but it took a while for a market to appear. There were popular Flash games on sites like Newgrounds, but no one was making much money. Steam began in 2003, but it was nothing like the platform we know today. It was created by Valve, who had grown to fame with Half-Life. For the next game, Counter-Strike, they wanted a way to control the patches and updates and to stop people from cheating. It was controversial because they wanted you to play the games through the platform, and in 2003, not a lot of people had broadband internet. But skepticism was swept aside when the hugely anticipated Half-Life 2 came out in 2004. If you wanted to play, you had to join Steam. This is what drove its initial adoption. By the next year, they were allowing non-Valve games to appear there too. As digital downloads became more common, Steam kept adding titles and eventually redesigned its e-store to help people find their way around this growing library. Like a number of other studios, Valve also supported indie developers who wanted to use their game engine to make mods and games of their own. Probably the first big hit on Steam was Garry's Mod, based on Half-Life 2. It came out in 2006 and has now sold 10 million copies. The developer, Punch, went on to release another best-selling indie game, Rust, in 2013. But the biggest indie successes didn't come from Steam. Minecraft has sold over 100 million copies and came to life on a forum, but it's an anomaly. Even its creator couldn't tell you how it got so big. Steam is still an indie developer's best shot at success. One developer, David Galindo, made a game called Cook, Serve, Delicious. He found that he made $50,000 in a week once his game made it onto Steam Greenlight. He had only managed $35,000 in 3 years before that. It used to be that getting on Steam was incredibly hard, but if you made it, there was big potential. However, now the problem is that the competition on the platform is far too high at the low end. Steam simply lets too many low-quality games into the ecosystem. There are over 20,000 titles in there now, and 20,000 is also the average number of sales. However, the big titles skew the data. Thousands of games have no sales, or just a few hundred. With Steam Greenlight and Early Access, Valve tried to create a level playing field so anyone had a shot, but it seems like a stronger filtering process would help developers. Its customers would certainly appreciate it. Also, most unknown games only get picked up in the sales. Steam often takes off as much as 75%, so unless you get a breakaway hit, it's going to be very difficult to find financial success. And bear in mind that Valve take 30% of any sale on Steam, so even at full price, that's a big chunk of revenue gone. Because of those rules and revenue cuts, big developers often choose not to sell through Steam, since they have their own platforms and can easily handle the sales. They also have giant marketing machines, so they don't need Steam's promotion. Blizzard Activision only sell their own games. And with EA, while they do sell others on their platform, Origin, the visibility is low. GOG.com and itch.io do offer competing options, but they only take a very small piece of the pie. So, Steam is not the golden ticket that some developers think it's going to be, but it certainly breathed life into the indie game scene after it recovered from the 90s. Steam have a major monopoly over the PC market, and monopolies are bad for developers and fans, but until a good alternative platform grows, at least there's some place where indie games are seen and promoted. Otherwise, it would probably be EA everywhere you look, and no one wants that, right? Want to learn more about business theory and history? Be sure to like and subscribe to be notified of our next segment.